They said he could have been like Messi. Thierry Henry called him a genius. Michel Platini compared him to Maradona, but instead he was left eating kebabs outside of PSG's training ground. They called him the biggest waste of talent in football. This is Hatem Ben Arfa, one of the sport's greatest what-ifs. Because he wasn't just another talented kid, he was the one, the prodigy that turned every touch of the ball into pure magic. At France's most prestigious academy, Clairefontaine, Hatem Ben Arfa exploded onto the scene. By the age of 15, the nation already knew his name, but not because of his goals. Rather, it was because of his temper. Ben Arfa was caught in a heated argument with Abu Dhabi on a nationally broadcast documentary in which he did not hold back. But that was the paradox. Even when he clashed with everyone around him, you couldn't take your eyes off him, and neither could France. He led his country to the Under-17 European Championship alongside Samir Nasri and Karim Benzema as part of a new golden generation. Nonetheless, Ben Arfa was the one where, if you was to put your money on who would win a Ballon d'Or, it would have been him. You see, at Lyon, Ben Arfa broke through before Benzema. At just 17, he was playing in Ligue 1. At 18, he was facing Manchester United in the Champions League, and by 21, he'd already won 4 Ligue 1 titles, where in 2008 he was named the best young player in the country. And well, it was no surprise. He had it all. The dribbling, the close control, the vision, the audacity to do things purely to get fans off their seats and clap. But there was a problem. He didn't listen. He didn't compromise. He didn't care for authority. Fights at training, arguments with coaches. It wasn't just defenders that Ben Arfa was facing. It was the entire footballing system. In fact, Ben Arfa even admitted later down the line that, yeah, ever since he was small, he was always fighting. And unfortunately, the further he went in football, the more fights he'd find. But let's rewind a bit, because it was at Lyon that Ben Arfa finally had his big breakthrough. After years of being the kid with hype, he was now starting to actually deliver on it. The 07-08 season saw him bag 8 goals in 43 appearances. Now, I know that might not sound mind-blowing, but the context is important here. The quality of goals he scored were of someone that seemed destined to be world class. And when you look at his teammates such as Benzema and Juninho, that was kinda expected. Even more so considering he was doing it in the Champions League. But whilst the fans were falling in love with his flair, tensions began to boil over with teammates. Most infamously with centre-back Sebastian Squillaci. The two had a heated bust-up during training that ended in a dressing room fight, and when match day came, Lyon left Ben Arfa on the bench and brought Squillaci on instead. Thus, the message was clear. Talent alone wasn't going to protect him anymore. And well, safe to say, Ben Arfa didn't take it well. He lashed out at the club that raised him, calling Lyon a small club and making it known that he wanted out. And so when Marseille showed interest, my guy was out of there. Or at least, that's what he wanted. But Lyon had different ideas. They refused the transfer, and so Ben Arfa refused to train. Marseille had already booked a medical, and therefore Ben Arfa went public and said that he was more than prepared to not play all season. Thus, eventually, Lyon gave in. The transfer to Marseille went through, but if anyone thought it would be a fresh start, they didn't know Ben Arfa. Within weeks, he was in a bust-up with Djibril Cissé. Then came a clash with Modeste Mbami just before a Champions League tie with Liverpool, and so the same kind of patterns returned. Missed training sessions, fights with teammates, but now also a new twist: public defiance of the manager. Oh dear. The most infamous moment came in a 4-2 loss to PSG. Eric Gerrits turned to Ben Arfa late in the match telling him to warm up, but he refused. He said he was injured, yet the manager didn't buy it. And so in the dressing room it exploded into a full-on argument, with Gerrits later telling the press how no player has ever done that to him and how Ben Arfa will get what's coming for him. And yet, in spite of this, Ben Arfa still delivered flashes of brilliance. He scored 6 goals in his first 13 Ligue 1 matches and played a pivotal role as Marseille pushed for the title. He even registered an assist in the Coupe de la Ligue final and scored on the final day of the season, finishing second in the league behind Bordeaux. But more importantly, at least for Ben Arfa, was that they finished one place above Lyon, and so he won, or at least it seemed that way. But then came Didier Deschamps, and things got even worse. Ben Arfa quickly fell out of favour under the new boss. His inconsistency and indiscipline returned, and Deschamps, building a serious title challenge, simply had no time for his nonsense. Therefore, Marseille tried to offload him. But when a deal didn't go through, Ben Arfa tried to prove his worth with a string of Europa League appearances. However, one match in particular summed it all up. Ben Arfa came off the bench against Benfica and scored a crucial equaliser, but in the return leg, he came on, lost his head, and got sent off after just 20 seconds. But despite the chaos, Marseille won their first Ligue 1 title in 18 years that season. And yes, Ben Arfa played a role, but Deschamps had made his mind up already. He told Ben Arfa directly that he was done. Thus, in 2010, he joined Newcastle. Some were doubtful, and well, it was understandable why. He had just declared war on French football. But in England, on a grey afternoon at Goodison Park, he silenced the doubters. His full debut against Everton ended with a thunderbolt, a left-footed rocket into the top corner from 30 yards. Newcastle fans hadn't seen magic like that in years, and so instantaneously a cult hero was born, a player the streets would never forget. But just a few weeks later, it all once again came crashing down. Against Man City, Ben Arfa was clattered by Nigel de Jong in a brutal challenge that left him with a double leg break. He'd played just 4 league games, yet his season of magic was over. For most players, it would be the beginning of the end. But Ben Arfa wasn't most players. He spent over a year out, battling doubts about whether he'd ever play at the same level again, but then in 2012 he came back and lit up St James's Park with a goal so outrageous it earned him a nomination for the Puskas Award. It came in the FA Cup against Blackburn, where he picked up the ball by the halfway line and just ran, skipping past defender after defender before placing it in the roof of the net. He made it look easy, and well, that same season he did it again, this time against Bolton with a solo goal I'm sure you've all seen countless times, as it's constantly in the streets won't forget or Barclaysman compilations. After all, it is one of the greatest goals in Premier League history. It was moments like those that made fans believe that they had a special player. He represented everything fans wanted to believe football still could be: unpredictable, creative, playing with freedom and flair. And so he didn't just become a cult hero, he became a symbol. When the club began to fall off under Mike Ashley's ownership, fans needed hope, and they saw that in Ben Arfa. At one point, supporters even created a massive banner at St James's Park, merging his face with that of the revolutionary icon Che Guevara and the word hope. But the fairy tale didn't last. Because as Habib Belaid, a fellow Clairefontaine graduate, once said, Hatem Ben Arfa is like Messi in his legs, and we don't know who in his head. Thus, he started to become inconsistent. He wasn't tracking back, he was skipping training, teammates were getting annoyed, and eventually Captain Colaccini reportedly told manager Alan Pardew that if Ben Arfa started, the team wouldn't play, and so the manager exiled him to train with the reserves, before pushing him out on loan to Hull City. Bear in mind that this guy was getting Messi shouts, and now he was on loan at Hull. Listen, a fresh start is a fresh start, I guess, but this wasn't. This time, Ben Arfa clashed with Steve Bruce, delivered a half-hearted display against Man United, and was subbed off before half-time. And that was just his 9th game for Hull. There wouldn't be a 10th. Thus, in 2015, Newcastle terminated his contract 6 weeks before it was due to expire. That's how much they wanted him gone. They couldn't even wait. In spite of that, Ben Arfa's time in the spotlight was only getting started. However, with his next move in January 2015 joining Nice aged 28, most people already thought that the Ben Arfa story had come and gone. He was finished. After all, Nice weren't a big club, but maybe that was the point. Ben Arfa said it took just 10 minutes to decide the transfer. He said that even if Real Madrid had called at that moment, he was only gonna go to Nice. But even that would have to wait. Due to FIFA regulations, Ben Arfa was ruled ineligible for the rest of the season because he'd already appeared for 2 clubs that year, Newcastle and Hull. However, that 6-month break became a blessing in disguise. When the 15-16 season finally began, it was like he'd pressed reset on his entire career. Under manager Lucien Favre, Ben Arfa was given something he'd never had at a professional level before: trust. There was no rigid structure, no tracking back, just freedom to do his own thing. And with that freedom, he flourished. He wasn't just a streets won't forget player anymore. He was now dictating games, pulling defenders out of position, linking play, scoring goals. The trust he was given by his manager was rewarded tenfold, with Ben Arfa ending the season with 17 goals and 6 assists. The best season of his entire career. Nice finished 4th, securing a Europa League spot, and Ben Arfa, the forgotten prodigy, was back on the radar of the national team, as for the first time since 2012, he was called up by France. He didn't make the final squad for Euro 2016, but that didn't matter. The redemption arc was already writing itself, and for a moment it looked like the story would turn around, as there was only one move Hatem Ben Arfa wanted next: PSG. Zlatan had just left and the French giants were looking for a bit of flair, some arrogance in their attack, and so for Ben Arfa it felt like destiny. But the downside for a move of this side was that, unlike at Nice, the team wasn't going to be centred around him. That freedom he finally found and flourished off of was going to be stripped away from him. Ben Arfa would yet again have to do what he's told, and he's not very good at that. Thus, the tension with Unai Emery began almost immediately. In training, Ben Arfa refused to pass. He dribbled until the ball was taken from him or the session was stopped. He even mocked Emery's attempts to speak French in front of the squad. Now, the players found that funny, but the manager did not. But then came the moment that sealed his fate. At a team event, Ben Arfa made a poorly timed joke in front of Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, the Emir of Qatar, about how PSG president Nasser Al Khelaifi was impossible to get a hold of. Now, it might not sound like much, but from that day forward, Ben Arfa was done. He didn't know it yet, but he would never play another match for PSG. He was frozen out of the squad entirely, ostracised from training. The club even offered to send him to Fenerbahce, but he refused. He wasn't going to be pushed out quietly. Instead, he launched a personal rebellion. He showed up to PSG's brand new state-of-the-art training facility and ate a kebab out front, in full view of photographers. He became a living meme. But the thing is, Ben Arfa actually got the last laugh, as he later sued the club for professional sabotage and won. In the end, his PSG career boiled down to just 2 years, 30 appearances and 3 goals. Life if Ben Arfa had just stayed at Nice. By this point though, it wasn't just football who viewed Ben Arfa as a problem player, he did too. In a rare, brutally honest interview, he spoke out about his lack of love from his father and how any affection or generosity in his life didn't exist. There was just one exception. One man, he said, who truly understood him: Raymond Domenech, the most ridiculed manager in modern French history, and yet for Ben Arfa, the man who gave him his first cap in 2007, the only one who made him feel seen. That being said, this isn't a Ben Arfa sob story. He himself also admitted that, yeah, he did some messed up things in his career, things that have no place in football, and so he vowed to change. Let's see if that's the case, shall we? Well, there was a stint spent at Rennes, 26 games, 7 goals, but most importantly, success over PSG in the Coupe de France in a comeback, which he of course loved, saying how they, PSG, are used to bottling it. But after Rennes, the cycle repeated one last time. He signed for Real Valladolid in Spain, but it didn't work out. Just 5 appearances, no goals, leaving just 6 months later. Next came Bordeaux, and with it injuries, as well as a locker room fallout with captain Laurent Koscielny and a poor relationship with the manager. So yes, Ben Arfa did in fact not change. He then signed for Lille, the reigning champions of France, but following a 0-0 draw with Bordeaux was yet more dressing room drama. Ben Arfa shouted at the manager that this isn't Gangomp, the coach's former team, suggesting that he was out of his depth. Thus, Ben Arfa was suspended before then calling both the manager and the club president twisted, which put the nail in the coffin of that short career, as he never played for them again. In fact, he's never played anywhere since then, and that was back in 2022. Thus, it seems the crazy story of Hatem Ben Arfa has finally come to an end. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe and ding that notification bell. It really helps out the channel. Also, whilst you're here, you may as well click this video on your screen as well right now.